Hey guys, what's up? It's BigJackFilms here, and welcome to another podcast interview. And today we have a very special guest with us, one who actually worked at the Universal Studios theme park. I'd like to introduce you guys to Darryl Benton. How you doing, man?
All right.
All right, yeah, so...
What's going on, Jack?
I'm doing pretty good. So, you had a hand in building a lot of the stuff at Universal Studios.
I was hired to be the manager of scheduling and planning.
Okay, so like, which attractions did you work on?
Well, when I first came in, I got because I was head of scheduling and planning, I had to work on a little bit of all of them. But as time went on, I got a little more involved in King Kong and E.T., Jaws, Ghostbusters. It was all the very first park at Universal, so it was all the stuff back in I went to work there in 89.
89, so it was about a year prior to the park being open, because I know they had started work on it like right after Universal relaunched in Hollywood in 1986, and they had they thought about building a park in Florida. And when did they exactly start construction?
Well, actually, when I went there in 89, we were in an office building across the street from where the park is today. And you could look out the window, and the park was just a big mud field. So that was 89, and they had started some infrastructure. And I think the only building I remember that was standing was the personnel building where you go to get your costumes and stuff like that. I went in that building in a vehicle, ID walls, but no actual walls yet. We actually drove into the building in a car.
Oh wow, yeah. So it was still early in construction. How long did it take to really pretty much put all together?
Well, let me see. That was when I got there in '89. It was about. Well, at that time, they were going, oh yeah, we're going to open up on such and such, and I'm thinking, nah, you're not going to open up for another, I think we actually opened at 90 or 91.
It was.
I went there in 88. God, man, it seems like so long ago now.
Yeah, I believe like the opening, the premiere of the park was June 7th, 1990.
Yeah, okay, that sounds right. I used to have a T-shirt with our opening day on it, but I think you have that now.
Yeah, actually, I have to thank you, by the way. You gave me a lot of really cool stuff, and I have them all pinned up on my Universal Studios shrine, essentially, because I've been collecting a lot of stuff. Actually, funny enough, there's a guy who's a private collector who's going to be shipping me one of the remaining pieces from Kongfrontation, which is pretty exciting. So, it's one of the prop pieces used in the attraction. And actually, speaking of which, what hand did you have in building, of course, the Kong ride in Orlando?
I've got a funny story about the King Kong ride. Actually, having been the scheduler, and having a part of all of it was something, but the actual project manager for the Kong ride was a guy named Chip Largeman. He still works for Universal out in California. He's the vice president these days. But I got to know him pretty well, so I was in and out of the building quite often, checking on progress. And I went in there one day during lunch, and everybody was kind of sitting around on the floor eating lunch, and Street Kong, because, there was two Kongs in the building. One Kong was on the bridge, and the other Kong was standing in the street. He's the one that reaches up and grabs the trolley and tries to kind of throw it to the ground.
Yeah, I remember that.
but they were working on him and programming him. And of course, we didn't have the computers we have today, so there was no Bluetooth, so we had cables running all over the place. And somebody was programming, I think, the movement of the arms, and it went past its limit switch. And the one arm kind of like waved, but it waved past its limit and hit a steel I-beam. And, and pieces of King Kong were falling, and everybody was getting up and running. and it looked like a real King Kong thing, you know.
Oh my God, that must have put people in a panic, because I can imagine, because like I believe a lot of the construction of those animatronics, they were like, they obviously had the wire skeleton, but like I think it was like mostly it was kind of like a big inflatable balloon, I believe, like when it was putting the muscle and stuff together, correct?
Yeah, well, they had put a lot of the fur on the arms already. So when that arm moved, it ripped some of the fur off, and it was falling, and people were jumping up and running, and it was like, it's alive! It was pretty crazy.
That's hilarious. And actually, yeah, because like, I remember I went on the ride, I believe twice. I went in 98 and 2000, and by that time they had actually had to cut the budget in half and limit the animatronics movements, because I watch a lot of footage off YouTube, and something I always wondered, like, I don't know if you would know any insight on this, is who was the developer who did like the banana breath and stuff? Because I've always wanted to contact them and get the like an air freshener from them, and just to have Kong's breath essentially in my presence.
Yeah, that's funny. You know what? I don't remember who the actual person was. I do remember when they were talking about it, because to me in those days, I came out of aerospace industry and the airport construction industry. So when I was on this project, to me it was kind of new, and they started talking about the King Kong roaring and having this banana breath, and I was like, what? These guys go all the way, you know, but I would have to talk to Chip Largeman to figure out who actually did that.
Yeah, because I would definitely like to have, like, whoever the company made it, just, like, can you make an air freshener? Like, it's the same thing with, like, E.T., because when I go in the E.T. attraction, I always smell that kind of pine wood, sort of, scent that they put, I guess, in the trees or something, but, that's another thing. Like, you also worked on the E.T. adventure, which, thank God, is still there, because I love that ride.
Yeah, E.T., you know, the big rides in those days, but, I mean, King Kong, they had a smaller version of it in California. But, so, you know, when we were doing that in Florida, it was, you know, it was a kind of like the same one from California, except on steroids. So, but what we had in Florida that they didn't have out there, of course, was E.T. and Back to the Future and Jaws.
Yeah, because Back to the Future and E.T. didn't show up in Hollywood until like a couple of years later after the Florida attraction. Jaws they do have in Hollywood, but it's just more part of the backlot tour. And actually, this is another thing I wanted to bring up is because I just bought recently a book called Adventures in Amity: Tales from the Jaws Ride, and it's a whole kind of a series of people who worked on the attraction, just discussing what went into making it, and it goes through like when they first tried it in 1990, it failed, and then they redid it in 93. Great book, by the way, worth seeking out. What was your involvement with Jaws?
Well, actually, on Jaws, you know, once again, I was the scheduler, but so I was, you know, in it while it was coming out of the ground, there quite often checking on progress. The cool thing about Jaws for me was, you're right, you know, it didn't work after a while, and we had to shut the thing down and then reopen. And when we shut it down, I actually was put on the team to get the water out of the lagoon and set up scaffolding so that the lawyers could come figure out what the problem was and who was responsible. But then I left Universal and went to work for a company that did work for Universal, and our first contract was the rebuild of Jaws. So I actually was there when we rebuilt Jaws, and then when we opened up again in 93, only I was not an employee of Universal, but I was an employee of the company, the Nassau company, that was hired by Universal to redo all the scenics.
Yeah, when you're working on these attractions, I guess you get to see a lot of like the sets and stuff when they're being developed and everything and constructed. Did you ever get up close with things like the animatronic sharks and so on?
Yeah, In fact, when we emptied the lagoon and the sharks, of course, were broken, we had hydraulic fluid all over. We had one of the largest oil leaks in an interior body of water in the state of Florida. So, we had to slurp all the contaminated water off, put it into tanker trucks, and send it to some special place in Jacksonville, I think.
Oh wow, that's
crazy.
That is crazy. Now, interesting enough is something I always am curious about because I do a lot of investigating. Is especially with Kongfrontation, the after the ride closed in 2002. A lot of people wonder what happened to a lot of the props and like pieces from that attraction because like there were rumors that the two animatronics were either scrapped or recycled or sold to auction on eBay. But one that I'm always curious about is the photo op Kong that was in the gift shop because there's rumors that they essentially put that in storage, but like there's no confirmation on that.
Yeah, well, Jack, that happened with a lot of stuff. We used to have a boneyard out. It was out beyond where Jaws was. A lot of stuff wound up in that boneyard, and it was kind of eerie for me because I worked there for so long that, I'd go out there and I'd think, wow, man, that's a piece of the Ghostbusters ride, or that's a piece of the Earthquake ride, and so that was pretty crazy. A lot of that just sat out there and collected dirt. I'm sure that at that time there were souvenir people grabbing stuff, but to me it was all work, so I never thought about that. But if that's where Photo Kong wound up, I don't know. I don't remember ever seeing Photo Kong out there.
Okay, that's interesting because I know there was a boneyard that was part of the park itself that was meant to display a bunch of props. They had like the shark from Jaws: The Revenge and so on, but the fact that there was another boneyard basically behind Jaws is actually kind of fascinating. So it makes you wonder like what else is out there. But obviously nowadays a lot of that stuff has probably been moved because they have to build other sections of the park, especially like Islands of Adventure and so on had to be put in there. So that's interesting.
Well, actually, where that boneyard was is now where the Men in Black building is. And I came back to Universal and started working for Universal again after being gone a while in 97. And I worked then from 97 till, I guess I worked 97, 98, 99. I was back at Universal because we were building Twister the ride.
Yeah, because Twister replaced Ghostbusters, I believe.
Right. And then after Twister, I was at Spider-Man for a little while in the new park, but then we went back to the old park, and where the boneyard used to be is where we built the Men in Black ride.
Okay, that's interesting. That's actually cool. I mean, I think Men in Black's all right. I mean, it's a nice little kind of add-on, but that's interesting that there used to be a whole backlot behind there, because I think, like, right next to Men in Black was the Wild West Stunt Show as well. Now, you also had a hand in doing the Back to the Future attraction. That was an exclusive to the park. That was, like, the first, one of the biggest e-tickets for Florida.
Yeah, what was so cool about Back to the Future was, motion bases were just coming in as rides and stuff, and the fact that Universal engineers put a motion base on a scissors lift and, lifted you into this semicircular screen that wrapped around you, and then the motion base started working after you were extended up and in, and that was a big deal at the time. In the fact that the stress that was on the scissor lift and the stresses that were on the motion base as it sat out there on the end of the scissors lift. I can remember when they were first doing it, I went into a building where they always set up your line of sight. And the thing about the Back to the Future was that when you're sitting in the car, you're up into that screen, but you really couldn't see the other cars around you. And so you just felt like it was you and the people in your car. And there was a lot of science that went into that. It was very cool.
Yeah, because nowadays the motion simulator has pretty much been abused to death at all the parks because every other attraction is now replaced with a simulator. Even there's the new Kong attraction that opened in Islands of Adventure next to Jurassic Park. And yeah, it's a 360 simulator, but thank goodness at the very end they do have another animatronic Kong at the very end of the ride. If you ever get a chance to go back to Universal, definitely check out that ride. It's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I'll have to do that. Your comment about the motion base, you're right, because Spider-Man was a motion base on a track, and that from the time of Back to the Future with a motion base on a scissor lift, that was really awesome. And then that's when they started looking, well, golly, we could put a motion base on a track. We could do that. All that stuff came out of that.
Yes, that's actually kind of cool. Another question I have is, again, I'm trying to stick this to more Kong-related material.
Sure.
Do you remember anything about like the pre-show, which was like the show they played during the monitors when you're waiting in the queue?
Well, the problem for me, Jack, is I did so many shows and they all have a pre-show. So I'm trying to remember. It seemed like King Kong was all about walking. Kind of like the streets of New York or something, going in, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were doing a whole, it was WWOR-TV in New York. They were doing kind of a fake news report about Kong being on the loose. They got Ronald Smith of the news reports to come in, and it's interesting because, like, I always wanted to see, like, the full show, but unfortunately, like, you can't find it anywhere. That's another thing, is, like, again, a lot of the stuff you just can't find anymore. Like, you can't, like, document it or anything. You'd think Universal would have, like, either, like, tapes or, like, papers and stuff to figure out where a lot of this stuff is.
Yeah, I know. I have that picture. Oh, no, I think I gave you that picture that I took standing in the middle of the King Kong building, and it was, before the day of digital photos. So I just took, actual picture and did a 360 and then scotch taped them all together on a piece of poster board, and I saved that forever, thinking that someday somebody might at Universal might find some use in it.
Yeah, I have it all. I have it pinned up on my wall. It's a beautiful piece.
Yeah, I thought when you got into this, I thought, well, you're the man that should have this, so. That's why you got it.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, I've always wanted to see Universal build sort of a museum dedicated to their attractions that's kind of like that has a lot of remnants of the old parks, but I'm surprised they've never thought about doing that.
Yeah, me too, because it all is very interesting how all this stuff came to be.
Yeah, so, like, also on, did you ever get a chance to work on Terminator 2 at all?
You know what? Terminator 2 is one that I did not work on. Of course, I knew a lot of folks that were on it, and that's because that was in between when the first park opened, and I left and went to work for that other company, and then when I came back to work on Twister, all those folks had just got off Terminator 2, and they started working on Twister. So, I knew about it, and I'd been to the show several times with them, but I wasn't there for that one.
They actually did just close Terminator 2 about a year and a half ago because it wasn't due to any problems or anything. It was actually due to the fact that James Cameron was getting the rights back and Universal didn't want to get into a court battle, so they essentially closed it down just for legal reasons.
Yeah, that kind of stuff happens too. I know.
Yeah, so it was kind of suck. I'm glad I got to ride it a few times because I think the show was amazing. And actually it's interesting because, like, Cameron always stated, James Cameron, who worked on the show primarily, had always stated that was what was going to be Terminator 3, and then the studio made Terminator 3 and it was terrible.
Yeah, which is what happens a lot sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. I also found it interesting with Kongfrontation in the pre-show, going back to that. They had actually used footage from the 76 remake to portray the Beast's rampage during the newscast, which I thought was kind of cool. But yeah, because I know, like, a lot of the ride was based on the 1976 film, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. You're exactly right, that the whole Kong rampaging through the New York City, and that was the whole basis for Kongfrontation.
Yeah, so
opposed to the backlot Kong they had in California, you know.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Did you ever, obviously you worked on the attraction and you probably got to walk through the set. What was that like?
Well, you know, one of the things you had to be real careful of when you walk through the set was because the King Kong that hung off the bridge Kong as we call him, you know, there was a wrecked helicopter that crashed into the bridge and was on fire and all that. Well, you had to let people know when you had to walk in there for a repair, or if you were taking somebody through the place to just see what the behind the scenes was, because the fire would flare up under that graded floor of the bridge, and it was like being on a giant barbecue grill, you know. And there's times when I was there with people where it just, you know, the cycle was, somebody would cycle it through because they were repairing something on the other end of the building, and all of a sudden this flame come right out, you know, through the base of the bridge, which is pretty scary. But I think that's my most favorite part, and I'm sure you would enjoy it too, was being behind the scenes and seeing how all this stuff works and how it all played together.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. So you actually got to walk on the bridge where that scene happens.
Oh yeah, you can. That's what I mean. You could stand down there with even street Kong, and when you're standing on the street, basically, which is like a New York street, you're looking up at all these buildings and stuff, and King Kong is standing there. You really feel like you are looking up at King Kong, because there he is, you know. And you're just this little person standing down the middle of the street.
You know, it's funny enough, there's a whole story with that, the attraction, that because in 1990 and during the 90s, when those two, the Hollywood and Florida attractions, were so popular that Universal at the time was considering doing a remake of Kong, and they had hired John Landis to direct it, and they had Robert Zemeckis producing it, and they were going to actually use the attractions to basically use to cut costs in using pieces for Kong. They were going to use the attractions to kind of have Kong during the scenes. And unfortunately, because of just complicated issues, John Landis left, and then they just never followed up on that. And they had also planned to, they actually had built a pinball machine based on the attraction, and there's only a few prototypes remain, but it's interesting that they basically built a whole King Kong pinball machine based on those rides.
Yeah, that is pretty wild. But you know, that's how the whole Universal deal worked, was to, it was ride the movies. I mean, that was their signs on the side of the road, you know.
Yeah, I love that.
We'll open up, come and ride the movies. And consequently, everything there is a set piece. You know, all the facades, you know, down Hollywood Avenue and so forth. And they did advertisements, and they did, you know, there was a lot of filming of stuff, and, you know, and the park was the background. But if you didn't know the park, you would go, oh, you know, that's really Hollywood Avenue, and yeah. That was the whole basis for the park.
It's kind of funny too, because I recently got back from New York City, and I decided to, just for old time's sake, to get that nostalgia for the Kong ride in. I did check out the Roosevelt Island tram, and I rode it, and comparing it to the actual attraction, the Florida attraction, obviously because of space, is kind of puny compared to the actual legit thing, because the legit Roosevelt Island tram is a lot bigger, essentially. You wonder, how the hell could Kong, in reality, try to grab the tram from there? So it was kind of interesting how they had to kind of, in a way, like, as much as it was a massive scale attraction, they did have to scale it down for certain sequences.
Sure, yeah, and to make it more, reality-based and be able to do it within the confines that we were subject to because of budget.
Yeah, did you ever, I mean, obviously you probably rode the attraction numerous times when it was around. Do you have any stories from, like, when you rode it those few times?
No, not really, because, other than, than getting to ride it, but to me, I have stood on the floor while the ride has gone on, To me, that's more interesting to watch than actually being on the ride, which is what you were alluding to earlier there in your conversation. But, you stand down, you could stand down on the floor back up in the corner, and people couldn't see you that were in the actual tram because, you're down below and they're looking at, King Kong himself, and they're looking out sideways as opposed to looking down. And it was just fun to watch it happen because it looks real, because, when the tram actually moves, when Kong reaches up to kind of bat at it, you think he actually did that, when in fact, when you're standing down on the floor, you realize how far away he really is from the tram itself.
Yeah, I noticed that because obviously he couldn't be able to legitimately hit the tram or else it would damage the animatronic.
Right.
Yeah. Now, another scene in the attraction I'm curious about is the whole elevated train, how that goes up in flames. How did that get all put together?
Whenever, on all these rides, when you have a flame deal, it's giant piped-in gas lines and with an igniter, and then, of course, they have to have an exhaust system above it and to, exhaust all the floating gas out of the building without people getting asphyxiated. Gas and fire scenes on any kind of a theme park ride are highly regulated, and which is why you don't see them on a lot of different rides. I mean, and it's a big budget item. Yeah,
because, I know, because I remember going on the attraction, either Kong or Jaws and so on, and whenever the fire came out, even when you're, very far away from it, you feel the heat, and that's something that I think, a lot of, kind of freaks people out a little bit, is the fact you feel the heat from these fires.
Especially when you're standing in a confined area, which was one of our biggest challenges when we did Twister, because that's how the tornado ended, in a fire tornado, and that was a lot of gas being pumped into the atmosphere right there in that room.
Yeah. Do you ever feel kind of feel like, man, Universal's really taking some bad hits here because they keep constantly closing the attractions? Do you ever feel like they should at least keep some of them open?
Well, the thing with most of them are they run their course, and then you have a whole, 10 years later, you have a whole new bunch of kids that reach the age to go, and things have changed where they don't want to see King Kong, they want to see something different. And of course, the movies are changing, and the good thing about today's world, of course, is they keep recycling movies. So, think about how many King Kongs there have been. So that's good for theme parks. But some of the other stuff, it's good for 10 years and then revamp the ride and it becomes something else that the new generation wants to see.
Yeah, it's true, because even nowadays, they are building a new park. Universal announced they're building a third park, and they've got a ton of new attractions coming in. There's talks of doing a Universal Monsters area. There's talks of a Nintendo Land, and there's also talks of a Lord of the Rings area of the park as well, which is fascinating.
Which is all the that's all the next generation of folks, which is what keeps these theme parks interesting,
Yeah, very true. But anyway, again, thank you so much, Darryl, for coming in and discussing these attractions, and especially Kong. It's really interesting to get kind of a perspective of somebody who worked on the attractions, especially somebody from the very beginning.
Well, you're welcome. I feel like I was very fortunate to have gotten to be there when it was just mud, and that my career was theme parks, because having started my career as a young 18-year-old in the jungles on the other side of the world, to actually have a career out of showing people how they could ride the movies and be part of it was kind of cool for me. I felt like I'd gone full circle, I can look back and smile and go, yeah, man, I made people laugh.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. Going to Universal that first time in '98 really inspired me to make films, and I think without going to that park, I probably wouldn't be having my full-time job on YouTube today, just making videos and stuff and entertaining people. So, from all of us here, we have to thank you so much for just, your work inspiring us to do what we do.
Well, you're welcome, man, and I really enjoy tracking and following you, Jack. I think it's great what you're doing.
Yeah, we'll definitely check out our, we did do a review of the 2 Kong attractions that are in Hollywood and Florida, and if you watch all of our videos, we do discuss the rides in detail. So if you ever want a kind of a flashback to what was going on there, definitely check those out. And also definitely check out, if you can go on Amazon, definitely pick up the Tales from the Jaws ride book, because it's actually a pretty fascinating read.
Ah, great. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and actually I'm in talks with the author to do a follow-up on Kongfrontation, so I'll definitely, if you want, I'll let him know you were a part of it, and you can, just do, a little thing, passage in the book.
Great.
All right, fantastic.
That'd be good.
Yeah, all right. Well, anyway, thank you very much for joining us. And guys, if you have any other questions and want to discuss things, let us know in the comment section below. And until the next video, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you guys later. This is BigJackFilms signing off, and have a good day.